Welcome to the June 19th edition of the PFF Forecast. We have got, we're continuing our series of one thing we like about every team in the NFL. It went decently well, I would say, on Wednesday. Most of it was really positive. It'll be, again, mostly really positive. We're going to do the AFC West and the AFC East, which means that Eric will have to move through talking about Kansas City and has to say something positive. I don't know if he'll be able to do it. We also have an incredible story from the father himself. Happy Father's Day to Eric Eager. And he has a great story about being on customer service as any dad would do. So it's going to be a great podcast. Let's rock. So we got on the Zoom call this morning, and it's obviously Father's Day. I wanted to know what your Father's Day was going to look like. And the first thing that you mentioned was probably the most I'm a dad thing that I've heard you say in a while, which was, well, I'm sitting on customer service right now. And I was like, for what? Like lawnmower equipment? But no, this is Eric Eager I'm talking to. So it's obviously with a sports book.
Yeah, I mean, so actually, it's actually a pretty good. So I've had a decent weekend in chronicling the state of American sports betting.
Okay. Wow.
So
it's a bold claim.
As you know, Friday after work, I met up with our colleague Ben Brown, who lives in Iowa. We met like probably 2 miles. I don't even know what the town's called, honestly. 2 miles south of the Minnesota border in Iowa. At a casino called Diamond Joe's, which I always used to drive by when I drove from Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minneapolis to Lincoln. I used to go down through Des Moines and stuff. So I always used to look at Diamond Joe's, and I always be like, oh, that's kind of interesting, like an interesting setup there. And then, of course, Iowa, the joke was always I actually texted my buddy, and I go, wait a sec, Iowa got gay marriage and sports betting before Minnesota? And he texts me back and he goes, yeah, if Iowa got a pro football team, Minnesota would want one too. And I was like, and so so Iowa's got sports betting. And so I go in there and it was really cool. There was a nice setup. They had individual chairs where you could plug in your laptop and all that kind of stuff. And there were TVs everywhere. Our friend Courtney Cronin was on Around the Horn. And then there was a VSiN station that was on. And the funny thing was, I think both of us made it onto a commercial onto that VSiN TV from our appearances there. So it was kind of funny. It was interesting though because it was a FanDuel run sports book. I actually TikToked out a bet I made on the Washington Commanders, which will be funny. But it wasn't as the offerings are not nearly as expansive. There are places where FanDuel is available that you can bet on WNBA player props and you can't bet on them in Iowa. So even the state of sports betting is still very incomplete. And to kind of discuss that, I get back and last night as one does, I'm watching some CFL late, right? So they have the 9:30 or 10:30 Eastern game on or whatever. And I have a small thing on a teaser in the game, so I'm actually watching it. And the Saskatchewan Roughriders are they keep getting offered these numbers, and they were behind for a little bit, so I kept betting them live. So I bet them -3.5, -6.5, -7.5, -8.5, -9.5, and they get an interception at the end of the game, kick a field goal, win by 10.
Okay.
And so all the bets are supposed to win, and it's not for a significant. It's $150, so it's nothing. I'm just goofing off betting CFL games on a Saturday night. And I look at my account and they're all canceled. And I'm like, I do remember during the game once they had the score wrong for 2 seconds, right? Mm-hmm. And so apparently that to me probably was the reason they canceled literally every live bet that was ever made on the game. But so I go to customer service and I go, hey, this is not right. And they first pass just said, well, sir, you made a bet of such and such -8.5. And it pushed. That's why it got canceled. I'm like, well, no, you can't push -8.5, so this is fucking ridiculous. And if you don't, and I basically was like,
that was their response. The response
it was
was
it was a very canned response, because you can imagine the number of people who bet who don't know anything, right? So then they're like, why did this get canceled? And they're like, well, sir, it pushed. And it's like, so that probably was like result letter A.
Mm-hmm.
And then so I kept, I'm like, sir, I'm like, miss, if you do not resolve this, I'm going to take a picture of this and tweet it out, and like, because this is fucking ridiculous. And so then they go through the channels. They're like, they send me an email late at night saying basically like, well, the reason your bets got canceled is because they're past posted. And for those that don't know about betting, like past posting is basically like the games, and this happens sometimes. The game starts and the sportsbook forgets to take down a line, and you can bet into it knowing what you like the first few results of the game, and obviously you can have an edge based upon that. And they'll cancel that. I think it's a very reasonable way to cancel, even though they make a mistake. And like honestly, you know, the better if like I entered a number into like my live model wrong and then bet it, and then like I go to the sports book and be like, sir, this is a very reasonable mistake, can you cancel my bet? They'd be like, fuck you. Even though I'm laying -110, and in the case of live lines -115, and they're getting that, you know. And so I'm like, this is easily verifiable. There are timestamps to these bets. This is a live bet. The game was going on while I made this bet, so this is clearly wrong. So I'm currently on customer service here. Hopefully they resolve it. I mean, again, like I said, it's not that much money, but it's like the principle of the whole thing is fucking ridiculous. Like how again, you're getting the best of it if you're the sportsbook. You're getting -115, and you also the thing about live betting that triggers me so much is these sportsbooks. If the situation moves in their direction, they can take your bet. And if the situation moves in the wrong direction, they have people, they're literally living the game while you're watching it on a stream. So like, if you bet a live game, you know, either like, if you're worse than flipping coins unless you think you have an edge. The sportsbook should say take every single live bet, because they have everything to their advantage here. And so it's disappointing. Obviously, like it's offshore, so like there's no regulation other than like public shaming. So like, you know, that's you know where we're at here, and I'm glad that it was sort of like my fun money and not my actual bankroll. But like, it's kind of sad.
I'm glad that you have enough. Do you have enough Twitter followers? I guess is the question for you to publicly shame them. That's what we're gonna find out, because you know what they're doing. You sent that thing. You and like every other person on Twitter that has any kind of following who's been mistreated has sent this message to customer service, and it will be a test of whether they believe you have that kind of pull. So I'm excited to hear about whether they think Eric Eager is someone to be messed with on social media. Okay. While we pray for you on this day to get your $150 back, let's jump into the AFC West. Let's get the AFC West kind of out of the way here first. What we're doing for anyone that is new here is each offseason we get positive about every single team. We will talk, we'll say one positive thing, one thing we like about every team. And then if there are bets that we like, we'll call those out too. But this is more, to kind of talk through what has happened in the offseason, what we like about these teams. It's going to be harder to bet, to find bets that you like here during the off season, because you're tying your money up for a long time. But if there are ones that we like, we'll call those out as well. All right, let's get into the AFC West here. And so it's going to be one thing that we like about every team. Again, this is going to be Herculean for Eric. We're going to start with the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't know if he'll be able to find something that he likes about the Chiefs going into this season. It's going to be a true test of you as a football analyst. And by the way, you started on this, and longtime member of the syndicate, your parents' dog, was so just hated so much that you were talking about the Chiefs that started making a scene. So we're re-recording this for the second. This is the second time we're recording this. Hopefully there are no other animals that hate your football takes. The Kansas City Chiefs, one thing you like.
Yeah, so there's like an underrated aspect to all of these, right? So I like what the Chiefs did in the secondary during the draft. I think it's underrated right now. Obviously, trading up for McDuffie, you don't like that from a mathematical standpoint. They put a lot of eggs in that basket. But I also like spreading the risk out a little bit. So Brian Cook, was taken with the day 2 pick. Safety from Cincinnati, a guy. So now, the Chiefs have always been a 3 safety system. It was Sorensen, Thornhill, and Matthew. Now it's Matthew gone, so it's Thornhill, Eric Reed, and now Brian Cook, which is great. Justin Reed, sorry, Eric Reed's his brother. And then they also went in the 4th round, got Joshua Williams, a really tall cornerback from Fayetteville, Jalen Watson from Wazoo, and Najee Johnson from Marshall. I think when you look at that team, it was starting to become extremely thin in the secondary. They lost Trevarius Ward to your 49ers as well. And there were just injuries, like Rashad Fenton missed time last year. Mike Hughes had to play in that Buffalo game. Got torched by Gabriel Davis a few times. So I think that the underrated part for them is how they address the secondary. I still have concerns for them about the front 4, but I think the secondary was a good approach.
Yeah, and you could make an argument that, one of the things you've got to like about the Chiefs are the young players that they've brought in. And that's the thing I like most about the Chiefs. I think there are a couple of things to mention here. The first is you look at the division odds right now. Chiefs are plus 175, Chargers are plus 225, Broncos plus 250, and the Raiders are plus 650. There's this kind of this thing that I like about the Chiefs this year, which is there's a narrative around, it's a true narrative around how good the rest of the division is. But there's also this, I think, chip on Mahomes' shoulder that should be there, which is Tyreek Hill has gone and he's, letting everyone know how he felt about Mahomes and the Chiefs. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous to talk about, Tua throwing the deep ball better than Patrick Mahomes. It's just incredible content. And then there's this influx of young talent, as opposed to what we've seen in the past from the Chiefs, which is like, hey, let's go overspend on every veteran we can find. Here, at least, and you talked about the McDuffie thing, which is an overspend for the trade up, but going and investing in young talent. And I look at Karlaftis, who was number 3 in our on our edge defender rankings, going at pick number 30. And then my favorite pick that the Chiefs actually made, which was Sky Moore, and getting rid of Tyreek Hill, picking up more capital, and then drafting young players who can come in and kind of hop on the Mahomes has a chip on his shoulder bandwagon. I love that. And so that's something that, as you look at this team, and you could have made a case, well, gosh, how do they re-rack? They've invested all this money in a lot of these older players. You've got Frank Clark, you've got Chris Jones, you had Tyrann Mathieu, and it's like, that's great. You won a Super Bowl with that, but how do you win the next Super Bowl? And to me, they're starting to build that foundation. So I don't know if I picked one thing here. If I had to pick one thing, it's that Mahomes has a chip on his shoulder because Tyreek Hill is going on podcasts saying that Tua throws a better deep ball than Patrick Mahomes. And that might be the most disrespectful thing anyone's said all offseason.
Yeah, I mean, I like, what do you think about the Tyreek Hill thing with Tua? It's like, you do want to defend your quarterback, but I remember distinctly when Randy Moss was traded to Oakland, and he was like, Kerry Collins is a better quarderback than Dante Culpepper. And you're like, Jesus Christ, man. Dante just threw for 39 touchdowns and 4,700 yards. But you don't really want to be like, oh, I downgraded at quarterback. You know what I'm saying? Like that's, that's a. Are
you asking me if I'm Tyreek Hill? What do I? Well,
what would you have said?
The first thing is that we have to realize is that this was Tyreek Hill's podcast. So Tyreek Hill got on this podcast wanting to say this, right? This wasn't him getting caught on, Good Morning America, and they were like, hey, Tyreek Hill, what do you compare your two quarterbacks? This was Tyreek Hill going, hey, I want to go on this podcast and talk about this. So if I'm Tyreek Hill and I actually have to answer this question truthfully, then I'm giving a non-answer, right? I'm like, oh, Pat was the best. He's obviously the best quarterback in the NFL. I'm not sure if it's even fair to make this comparison because Tua's young, but I went to this team because I have faith in that young quarterback. You just give that kind of non-answer. But the thing here is that Tyreek Hill actually wanted to say this, which is crazy to me. And I guess if you're Tyreek Hill, or if you have Tyreek Hill on your team, which says a lot about you as a team to begin with, but I guess you want that irrational confidence. So maybe he actually believes it. You've got to believe it, I guess, to some degree if they're going to be successful. I don't know. I think.
Well, and I think like there, one of the reasons why like guys like me probably we're good play, we're not NFL players besides talent was like the amount of like suspended disbelief you need to have to be a great player is probably higher than like the two of us possess, right? Like the ability to believe in something that's clearly not true is maybe a cornerstone of like playing a game where you bang your head in voraciously repeatedly.
Yeah, like every single NBA player believes they're the best player in the league. Yeah, that's a good take. Okay, the Los Angeles Superchargers. The thing that you like about them is what?
Yeah, I think Bryce Callahan was a really good signing for them. He earned about half a win as recently as 2020. He has missed a lot of time. But you look at that defense and, they kind of needed a guy who can play that nickel position really well. Derwin James is never a lock to play the whole season. The linebacker position, is not great. Corner, I think that they've done, yeoman's work with J.C. Jackson and obviously Asante Samuel Jr., but Callahan, I think, rounds out that defense really well. I think their defense is going to be vastly improved, and I think he's an underrated reason why. He's been a good player for a ton of defenses.
He has, and it's certainly an underrated move amongst the moves that they've made, and the moves that they made. J.C. Jackson obviously was the biggest splash to start off the offseason for them, and then Khalil Mack pairing now with Joey Bosa. So those are easy. Those are kind of easy ones, and I'm not going to choose Mack or J.C. Jackson. I like the fact that you picked, bringing in a slot corner. You look at their corners. You have Asante Samuel Jr., you've got Khalil Mack, you've got J.C. Jackson. Sorry, why did I mention Mack there? Bryce Callahan, J.C. Jackson. You have a really solid set of corners. Then, of course, Derwin James. Nasir Adderley, you have back end as well. But here's what I'm going to call out. Something, and what I was trying to think about here is, like, what do I like about the Chargers that makes me feel they can overcome the Chargerness? And what do I mean by Chargerness? Every person gets excited about the Chargers. Maybe it's the powder blues. Maybe it's the fact that like they used to be in San Diego, and it sounds like a hipster thing to kind of like a football team from San Diego. And everyone gets excited about this team, and then they just can't make it happen. And last year was definitely that happened again, right? They couldn't even beat the Raiders to make it into the playoffs. But if you're thinking through some of the reasons why that won't happen again, there are a couple for me. The first is Brandon Staley as a leader of this football team making decisions that are going to either they're going to win or lose with, as opposed to letting the other team or the circumstances around them kind of dictate those things. I think that would be the easy one. But I'm going to choose the fact that they have a top half of the league offensive line. And if you go to our offensive line rankings, which you can find on PFF.com, by the way, you can get for 25% off with promo code Forecast right now, you'll see them at number 12. And that is huge for them. Like, they have had a really bad offensive line for a while. Now, that's not maybe the biggest reason that you have faith in them. Obviously, Justin Herbert is that. You have Brandon Staley. You have that great defense. But it's a sign to me that the Chargers are changing a little bit. And so if you have hope for them turning into the Chargers of old, this would be one of those reasons.
Yeah, the Staley one's interesting. I did the defensive play caller rankings, and I didn't feel like I could put him in there because, like, I think that his defensive scheme is wonderful, but the players weren't there last year, right? And like, there's an aspect of trying to run a scheme where you're playing players that can't fit into that scheme, and I do think that that's a negative on the ledger for a coach, right? I think that that's certainly a problem. So now that they have the players in place, we'll see how good that ends up being. There's also an aspect of like Raheem Morris taking over that same defense, and while like the Rams, from an efficiency standpoint, weren't as good defensively last year, as they were the season before. They lost John Johnson, they lost Troy Hill. They lost Sebastian Joseph Day for a sequence of time, a guy that now is on the Chargers, and they still end up winning the Super Bowl and win the NFC West. So like, I need to see it from Staley, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Interesting one here with Denver, and this is going to stretch out my naming here. Albert Abuikuem has been great so far this offseason without Noah Fant there. He was a 97th percentile like speed guy out of Missouri as a tight end. Alberto. Is this other than like Jimmy Graham is like the only good tight end that Russell Wilson has ever played for or played with? Does this change things for you as far as Denver's concerned?
Well, I think it's one of my favorite things about the Denver Broncos is that they sometimes it's not what you gained, it's what you lost. My favorite thing about the Denver Broncos is that they don't have Drew Lock or Noah Fant on their team anymore. And this is, one of the reasons that they certainly had faith in getting rid of Noah Fant was Albert O was actually better. And, you look at the type of tight end that Russell Wilson has played with before, and I think Albert O, to your point, fits that nicely. And in this, and as I look at the Packers scheme coming in, I immediately think about that Robert Tonyan season, right? And similarly, a super athletic, big guy who can get down the football field and make catches, as opposed to Noah Fant. So if you're drafting, for example, in fantasy or something like that, I'm kind of the person that either you get the elite tight end or you just, wait. This could be a guy that breaks out and has one of those top seasons. I like that quite a bit. Their regular season win total is at 10. Over is -120. Under is +100. And I guess my favorite thing, as I was going to say, is that they don't have Locke and Noah Fant. But I also love that they went and brought in a head coach that has seen the way that it should be done over there in Green Bay. And yes, of course, he had Aaron Rodgers, but it wouldn't surprise me. It would not surprise me to see the Denver Broncos, hit the ground running here, just because they've got a lot of pieces that you are looking for, as we've talked about with Russell Wilson. You could look at Aaron Rodgers and go, oh, it took Aaron Rodgers a little while in that system. But I also look at Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson a little bit differently, because I think Russell Wilson will come in and be eager to learn this new system, given what he had in Seattle before, whereas there might have been a little kind of push and pull with Aaron Rodgers.
We are getting a little bit of clarity in BetOnline.ag's response here. There was human error cited in the offering of the lines, to which I said 5. So you made a human error in a line that I bet into 5 times that you just never took down. This is getting quite interesting. I think the transcript of this interaction between me and this person on BetOnline's front is going to be kind of cool.
They woke up this morning. Some poor person in Antigua woke up this morning, did not know they were going to get hit by a bus, and they are. The Las Vegas Raiders are up next. A lot of things to potentially like about the Raiders. Which one did you choose?
Yeah, I thought the interesting one for me, and I know this isn't sort of underrated, but we did this NGS, sort of like 40-yard dash time equivalence based upon how fast you get off the football as a pass rusher. And last year, Max Crosby was the fastest person getting off the ball last year. So 4.60 was sort of the equivalent 40-yard dash per that metric. He was actually 0.03 of a second faster than the next best player. And if you look at the other players, this is good company. Leonard Floyd, 4.63. Myles Garrett, 4.64. Von Miller, 4.64. TJ Watt, 4.64. And Rashawn Gary, 4.64. And Joey Bosa, 4.65. So, Max Crosby was the most explosive player getting off the ball last year among pass rushers, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that is really cool, and speaks to what an incredible season he had, by the way. And now will be paired with Chandler Jones. We talked about this before, but I'll mention it again. My favorite thing, or the thing I like about the Raiders, is that they are a really good team, but they're the worst team in their division. And so this is an opportunity to bet the leader in passing yards with Derek Carr and leader in receiving yards with Davante Adams. And basically my hypothesis here is that these two guys are going to be on the same page. I'm not concerned about these guys figuring it out together. Derek Carr 10-1 for most passing yards, and Davante Adams is 12-1 most receiving yards. And I think there's one, this is not something that's underrated about this team, certainly, but last year when Darren Waller was banged up all season. Like, Hunter Renfrow was the go-to guy on that team. Like, you go and you line up against the Raiders, you're like, we got to stop Hunter Renfrow. And you know what teams couldn't do? Stop Hunter Renfrow. So, as you think about this offense, I'm really excited about this offense. I think this offense could be really freaking good. Derek Carr, in my opinion, has been kind of maligned and underrated as a quarterback. He continuously grades well, especially from a clean pocket. And now he's got two guys that just get open at all times, plus Darren Waller. I don't know. It makes too much sense. So I don't know. Somehow this is gonna collapse. But 10-1 Derek Carr to lead the league in passing yards might be my favorite offseason bet right now. And Davante Adams 12-1 most receiving yards I think is exciting as well.
That one's a good one.
I mean, he's the best receiver in the NFL, and he's the sixth favorite there because people are worried he doesn't have Aaron Rodgers anymore. I wouldn't. I mean,
they're going to throw for a lot of yards because that team's not going to be very good. Let's face facts. That team's not going to be very good.
There's plus 650 to win the division. They're at 100%. And if he were going to a team, okay, let me put it this way: if Davante Adams were going to the Miami Dolphins, I could understand it. Okay, because you don't know if Tua can get the ball there. Derek Carr can get the ball there. And they played together in college. And these guys are both super incentivized to be on the same page. They're both super hard workers. I don't know. I guess we'll see. Before we get to our next division, a quick reminder that fantasy season is actually already here. And that's because best ball fantasy football is right now with Underdog Fantasy. The cool thing about best ball, you draft once, and then every single week, the best, highest scoring players on your team are the ones that count. You don't have to make any pickups. You don't have to decide who to start and who to sit. It's super easy, and you can win a ton of cash. Best Ball Mania at Underdog Fantasy has $10 million in total cash prizes. And for all of our members of the syndicate who are looking for some trends here, person that won last year drafted in June. So just saying, go use promo code PFF at Underdog, and your first deposit will be doubled up to $100 if you use that promo code PFF as well. If you use $10 using promo code PFF, you'll get a free PFF subscription. This is an incredible deal. So go download the app. It's a great app, works really well. Or go to UnderdogFantasy.com, use promo code PFF, give yourself a chance at millions of dollars, and have some fun. All right. We are going to the AFC East, and we're going to start with the Buffalo Bills. Eric, what do you like about the Buffalo Bills?
Bills home games had the highest wind speed of any stadium in the league last year, both average and median. Despite this, Josh Allen finished fifth in the NFL in WAR with 3.6 wins above replacement. I do think...
So hold on. This is one of the coolest ones. I was reading your notes before this. This is my favorite one. Do we have to eat some crow? Because I can remember being on a podcast, I think it was during the pandemic, and we were making fun of the rationale for picking Josh Allen as, he can throw through the wind. I think it was with respect to Cleveland drafting him. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that
arm talent matters here.
Yeah, arm talent matters. Could it also be an issue with, we're not going to talk could it also be an issue with Watson because Watson kind of has a noodle, not like a noodle, but he doesn't have I think the biggest knock on him coming out was that he didn't have the strongest arm. And obviously Cleveland is not a place, Cleveland might not be the best place for somebody who doesn't have the kind of rocket that Josh Allen has. Mm-hmm. I will say, though, I mean, it doesn't mean necessarily, like I said, I think Josh Allen's amazing. I'd put him as the second best quarterback in the NFL. That doesn't necessarily mean like he was he had averaged 6.8 yards per pass attempt last year. Like it still doesn't necessarily like work. He did regress last year, and I think, but I would say there are explanations for this, right? Like when you look at the road games that he played had crowds in them, unlike the season before, right? Mm-hmm. So your road games aren't nearly as conducive to success, and then your home games are there's 9 of them, and there's a quagmire of like snow mm-hmm. and wind speed. So when you look, like his completion percentage went from 69% to 63% last year. His interceptions went from 10 to 15. His yards per attempt went from 7.9 to 6.8, so a full yard. Mm-hmm. And yet, like, and his QBR, quarterback rating, like, again, that's not a great stat, but we all know the range, went from 107.2 to 92.2. And so, like, again, like, I think he was great, and I think PFF grades and PFF WAR reflect that, but there was some regression in his statistics. And I think part of that is due to the fact that, like, there are conditions in Buffalo that aren't conducive.
He was the highest graded quarterback last year under pressure. 10th from a clean pocket. Was also number 1 in positively graded throws. There were some things that he does that are, kind of spectacular, and he did those again last year. And so, that regression that you talked about, shows up in terms of, he was 10th from a clean pocket, right? We know that's something that's sticky, and he tried, he overcame that with a lot of incredible play, whether under pressure or just making those incredible throws downfield. I also will call out this. The guy's a beast. So, you think about these games where, the weather is inclement. The guy can also carry it 15 times and run over you. Now, I don't know that's the most sustainable way, to win football games. But here's just to your point here. We all remember that game against the Patriots where, it was like 70 degrees below zero and winds are 60 miles an hour and all that stuff. One of the things that I think it gets forgotten about that game. Go back and watch it. You don't have to watch much of it to know what's going on. Josh Allen and his throws were unfazed by that weather. You know who was fazed by that weather? The receivers. The receivers could not catch a ball. Josh Allen was tattooing them with it, and it was the receivers that couldn't figure it out. Yeah. And Dawson Knox, I think actually all of the big receivers had drops. And that we think about that game as, the Patriots established their will and all this stuff. Like, I was super impressed with Josh Allen in that game.
Yeah.
Here's my favorite thing about the Buffalo Bills. And again, this is, they brought in Von Miller. That's amazing. And you could talk about that. But my favorite thing is how deep their receiving core is. Gabriel Davis was 10th in PFF grade last year. In fact, he had a higher PFF grade than Stephon Diggs. Now, am I saying Stephon Diggs is not as good of a receiver? No. My point here is that Gabriel Davis is awesome. And their slot receiver this year is going to be Jamison Crowder, who has been mired with the New York Jets for a while. Did not grade well last year. I will go ahead and say that might have been about the situation he was in, and that will improve quite a bit. You have Dawson Knox at tight end. Oh, and by the way, they drafted a running back, and yes, I'm talking about the running back that they drafted, James Cook, who is an athletic guy that can catch the football. So what they're doing is really building a receiving core that is going to give Josh Allen options across the football field. And so you think about teams playing a ton of too high and all this different stuff. They have got players who should be able to make plays at each level, of depth down at the football field, and I think help mitigate any of those issues that defense will throw Josh Allen's way. I'm a big Gabriel Davis fan. Obviously, he went off in the playoffs. And
On my
everyone knows
Chiefs.
that, but yeah, on your Chiefs. But yeah, I think that should be really exciting and something that I love about the Bills this year.
Yeah,
Okay,
for sure.
the Miami Dolphins.
Of Anaheim.
Yes.
Okay, with the Dolphins here, I'm a little like shook by this. And look, I think almost every experience, like I've been limited on sports books before. I've had bets canceled. I've had bets canceled for like reasonable reasons, like where there was one time where Ben and I got like in an NBA prop, we got like a really bad number on I think it was like Bradley Beal. I actually don't know. Like I'm not even gonna pretend to know the player. But like I bet over it like for the max, and then they like canceled it and we called, and like eventually they gave us like site credit and stuff. This is just like they just like basically stonewalled me here, which I think is fucking hilarious. Like imagine getting getting plus 115 and being like, yeah, human error, and I'm like, 5 times you produced a human error 5 times during the course of the game, you just left it up. But that and again that just shows you like what you're up against when you're sports betting. Like I said, it's not that much money. Like it's not going to affect my life, but like you are not only laying 110, and in the case of live lines 115 at times, but you are also dealing with the fact that if you fuck something up, and I actually messaged this person. I go, what if I put in a number wrong where I added a 0 to my bet? And they're like, well, we ask everybody to review their bets before they place them. I'm like, how about you review your live lines before you post them? And that obviously wasn't well received. So
I'm shocked by that. Let's transition nicely to the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah. Let that be a lesson to all of us bettors that like it is against you. It is stacked against you. Javon Holland was the 9th most valuable rookie in the NFL last year. That is my Miami Dolphins take. I was a big fan. I'm a big fan of him. I think, it was interesting. When the Chiefs were going to trade for Tyreek Hill, trade Tyreek Hill. I had on good authority that there were only 2 players on the Dolphins who were untouchable, and they were Javon Holland and Jalen Waddle.
Makes sense.
And that's high praise for Holland. I think obviously Waddle's a top 10 pick, but that's high praise for Holland.
Yeah, Holland is freaking awesome. And I love that you talked about the defense there. One of the things that I picked something nice and underrated here from your article on defensive play callers. And, much is made of the offensive moves that the Dolphins made, right? They go get Mike McDaniel, who comes over from San Francisco. They trade for Tyreek Hill. They have all this faith in Tua, obviously figuring it out at some point, but they, have Teddy Bridgewater there as well. Like, they brought in Raheem Mostert. Like, all these moves are super offensive minded. And it could have been easy to say, look, I really like, Jalen Waddle, and I do. He's great. And you love what Mike McDaniel might be able to bring to that. But their defense was really good. And one of the reasons for that was Josh Boyer, who was retained by Mike McDaniel and was one of the reasons that, they were able to win 9 games last year. And you talk about Javon Holland. You talk about there's also Christian Wilkins there. But you have him number 5 in best defensive play callers. And that, look, do I think that Brian Flores got the absolute shaft? Yes, 100%. But retaining a guy like Josh Boyer, having these talented players on defense, it doesn't have to be for the Dolphins that their offense turns into, the Chiefs of 4 years ago. That doesn't have to, or the Niners or whatever. That doesn't have to be the way that they win in 2022. Like, there's a chance that their defense is really, really good and that Tua's like meh, and they like scrape their way to 9 wins, which, by the way, is their win total at 9. We've talked about this a bunch. Under 9 is now minus 125. We mentioned this a couple weeks ago. I think that we really liked the Dolphins under 9 wins. Again, this is positivity. And I think one of the reasons that you could say, oh, well, how do they go over 9? It's, well, yeah, their offense might not be amazing because their quarterback's not great, But their defense could be really good. And guess what? They can just snap the ball directly to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Raheem Mostert, and maybe they'll be okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the hard part is in this division, I guess the Jets are terrible, possibly. The Patriots offense might take a step back because we got Matt Patricia calling the plays.
Mm-hmm.
But those were already table stakes. I mean, like, as every freaking Dolphins fan will tell you, Tua's 3-0 against the Patriots, which, by the way, will be a nice, like, fun footnote to what really happens. It's not predictive of anything, but, like, good for him. But, like, the Dolphins' records over the past 2 years are buoyed by the Jets and the Patriots being bad, right? Like, you know, as far as relative to usual. So do you... And so I don't know if I don't know if they can defense their way out of this then.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, because we're going to do the Patriots next, and this is how I want to tee this up. AFC East division odds right now, the Bills are prohibitive favorites. This is Chiefsian, minus 225. Dolphins plus 450, Patriots 5-1, Jets 22-1. Who should the Dolphins have better odds to win this division than the Patriots?
Yes, but I think so.
Really?
Mm-hmm. I mean, the thing about this is, like, Mac Jones is undergoing, like, what we've seen happen from, like, a lot of first round, like, a lot of rookie quarterbacks that have a sophomore slump, right? I mean, Herbert was really the only one, you know, where, and then that was because their staff got fired, not because their staff got promoted, but, like, it's like a famous, you know, it's the classic, like, rookie quarterback gets drafted, does well, offensive coordinator guy gets praised for doing well, offensive coordinator guy leaves, new offensive coordinator guy joins, and so not only do you have to deal with, like, the natural gravity of regression, but you also have to learn a new offense. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we saw it with, like, Baker Mayfield. You know, the Freddie Kitchens thing was a little weird. I can't remember the entire list, but there's a significant fraction of, like, those, like, Sam Bradford was another one I want to say. You know, there's a lot of, like, young quarterbacks that come in and the offensive coordinator gets a ton of praise for having the guy be good early, and then they leave, and then, like, things aren't as good. You know, like, that's I think an honest to God possibility for New England. Additionally, you know, what has New England done to patch up the things that they're weak at? Like, their defense continues to lose players, and obviously Belichick can continue to make that defense good, but they were great last year until the playoffs. And then, you know, on offense, they lose Shaq Mason. You know, they get Devontae Parker, but, like, he's not really a number one receiver. The tight ends that they signed last year didn't really, like, you're basically hoping on veteran players to improve, which is, like, a really hard, like, gamble to make.
Yeah. With that said, what's your favorite thing about the Patriots?
Mac Jones was the most valuable rookie player in the NFL last year. He was worth $28.4 million on a cap hit of $2.83 million. That's a 10-1 return on surplus value. So that's pretty good, right? Like, that's
not bad.
That's a, you know, that is what we're talking about, right? That is what we're talking about when, you know, I write the article about, hey guys, you don't have to draft the next Joe Burrow to be amazing. You don't have to draft the next Josh Allen to be amazing. You can draft the next freaking Mac Jones or Jalen Hurts, and you can get to the playoffs, you know, and you can get these humongous surplus values out of them, because 2.8 wins above replacement is, like, I'm trying to remember, like, 13th, 14th, 15th. Like, it's not a top, you know, it's not a top, like, you know, 10 value in the NFL, but it's certainly a top 10 value per dollar spent. And that's, I think, the whole point. And good on New England for, you know, taking a chance on Mac Jones. Good on New England for, like, like, I'll ask you a question, you know, about this, George. If Cam Newton earned 2.84 wins above replacement last year, the Patriots, what situation are the Patriots in right now?
Well, it's interesting. The if Cam Newton had earned that many wins above replacement, I feel like just the narrative would be so different. You know, it's like, you know, is Cam back? Like, there'd be all this pomp and circumstance. And the way that Mac Jones' season went, I think there are a lot of questions, right? Because you look at, you see this on PFF.com and our quarterback annual, you see his grades week by week, and like week 10 onward, 2-1 in terms of games where he graded in the bottom third of the league versus where he graded in actually it's more than that. He had only one game where he graded in the top 10 or top half of the league. And all these games that were really poor. And so because of that, there's like, not only is it the fact that not only is it that he had that total, wins above replacement, but the way that it happened, I think, has people, with more questions than maybe you would generally. But I'll say this, if Cam Newton had that same season, I don't know that Cam survives that end of the season, to be perfectly honest. I think that Mac Jones would have come in and played for him. And the fact that Mac Jones had already beaten out Cam Newton, I think, was a good thing because it gave him that opportunity to kind of hit that low. And that's actually my positive for this team going into this year, is that Mac Jones has already hit a low. He came out, he played really well, and then had a really tough end of the season. And I think that is going to help him a lot. You look at some of the areas that are stable. He was 13th from a clean pocket last year. He avoided negatively graded throws at the 11th best rate. And you're still not super excited about the receiving core. At least they have Devontae Parker now. Jacoby Myers, the top 25 graded.
We are the world, by the way. Is that at least they have Devontae Parker now.
Yeah, I mean, it's not pretty.
Now. It's like we are the world.
It's not pretty, but it wasn't pretty last year either. So I think that the thing that would give me some hope there, and if I'm thinking through, like, how does Mac Jones overcome Matt Patricia calling offensive plays? Well, he had to deal with some pretty tough situations at the end of last season and not playing well. So maybe that's prepared him for the pencil in ear wizard coming and calling offensive plays. I know we're supposed to be positive here. That when I read that, I was like, is this a joke? Like, to me, this is the ultimate sign of Bill Belichick's ego. He was like, you know how good of a coach I am? I'm going to replace Josh McDaniels with Matt Patricia and have him work with a sophomore quarterback with literally no one to throw to, and we're going to be good this year. Like, if they're good this year, Bill Belichick, I mean, he's already obviously a Hall of Famer, greatest coach of all time. But, like, does he buy himself another boat? He has that boat with, like, the number of rings. I feel like he buys himself another yacht and calls it something like, I overcame Patricia, or like I revitalized Patricia, or something like that. It's ridiculous.
The only person who has a boat that says I overcame is Russell Wilson, right? Like, that's
a true overcomer. The New York Jets, your New York Jets.
Dude, there was nothing good about the Jets last year, but I tried to find one. Yeah. Bryce Hall was the most valuable player on their team. 0.38 WAR. And I guess, like, the thing I could take from this is, like, he's not even a starter this year right now. Like, with Reed, Gardner, and Michael Carter in the fold this year, Bryce Hall is, the overall water level of the Jets roster has gone up. Like, I think that's unequivocal, to say. So
I agree with you. And they have done, they have brought obviously a lot of talent onto this team. You got Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner, both top 10 picks. I think you're really excited about those guys, and you should be. The thing for me was seeing Braxton Berrios and Zach Wilson working out together this offseason.
Throw it up.
Yeah. Now, why is that the thing that I'm calling to positively? Well, Braxton Berrios is a guy that no one thought would really make it anywhere in the league. And, it was good at Miami, but, like, whatever. Comes out, and I don't have his grade right in front of me right now, but I think it was like 83 or something like that, his PFF grade. I'll find it here in just a second. And, by all accounts, is a super hard worker, like a really freaking hard worker. And Braxton Berrios, 74 PFF grade, sorry.
Oh.
And so seeing Zach Wilson getting work in with a guy like Braxton Berrios, who has only made it this far because he works his ass off, is something to be excited about. Because you got to be a little worried about Zach Wilson. He did not look particularly wonderful last year. You don't hear stories glowingly about, not that I've heard ones to counter this, but like, you want to hear that a guy that had a season like that puts in the work the following offseason. So I don't know if this is just, Instagram telling you that they are or not, but it gives me some confidence and excitement that Zach Wilson comes out and improves dramatically on that season. I think the other thing to be excited about here is that Braxton Berrios is actually pretty freaking good. 35th of 115 in PFF grade among wide receivers. And then you, of course, add, a guy like Garrett Wilson there. This is a receiving core that should be good and give Zach Wilson a chance. So 22-1 to win the division, I think that says it all. But taking a step forward for Zach Wilson, maybe a little bit higher, a little bit better odds.
Yeah.
Your boy.
Yeah, I hopefully he's good. I think that it'd be nice to see him. Remember what the league could really use another just like absolutely rocket arm quarterback with some moxie, And
they could. I don't know that that's going to be Zach Wilson.
The good old Zach Wilson, but he has a rocket arm. I'll give him that.
Yeah, I'll go with Trevor Lawrence being that guy after this season.
Yeah, the interns are going to come out with the perfectly covered plays article, I think Monday, which will be wonderful. I think Lawrence's ability to sort of mitigate the downfall on those plays was a good sign last year in a year where, man, there weren't a lot of good signs for him. So I'm excited to see him play. I think Doug Peterson, there's always a question about whether or not, he's still got it, but he certainly, ushered in a good era of football for Carson Wentz and for a brief period of time.
Yeah, it should be noted, Doug Peterson should have a boat that says, "I won a Super Bowl with Nick Foles and Carson Wentz." If he doesn't already, go get that one made. All right, that was our podcast. Thank you for hanging out. I'm not going to mention the Formula One bets because that's where I'm going right after this. So we'll talk about it on Wednesday. It's kind of a weird one to figure out, the Canadian Grand Prix, and then we'll find out the result of Eric's battle with the sportsbook. Thank you guys for hanging out. We'll see you on Wednesday. Peace.